In skateboarding, there are some tricks that always look amazing, and then there's other tricks that, well, don't look so good. Today, we're going over the ugliest tricks in skateboarding. Now personally, I don't really think any tricks are ugly. Well, maybe flamingos, but that's about it. These are just tricks that have a reputation for being ugly skate tricks, but I think when it comes down to it, just about any trick can look good if it's done right. This video is meant to be lighthearted, so take it with a grain of salt and do whatever tricks you like. If you feel like there were any good ones missed, or in this case, bad ones, just leave it in the comments. Make sure to leave a like, and with that said, let's get right into the video. So as fun as they may be, a lot of people hate on no complies as being an ugly skateboarding trick. I mean, after all, you can't even do them in battle at the barracks. There's a no comply counterpart for almost every single flip trick, but people usually dislike them all equally. I think the reason why it gets so much hate is because you have to step off of your board to do it, which tends to be a deal breaker for a lot of people. It's also kind of hard to pop a no comply, so they tend to be pretty low to the ground, which is never a good thing style-wise in skateboarding. Aside from that, a couple years ago, no complies really got blown out when the trendy style of skateboarding emerged, so that definitely didn't help the no complies case. Even though no complies are a lot of fun, they're for sure one of the most hated on tricks in skateboarding. Late flips get a lot of hate in skateboarding. Whether it be late front foot flips, late back foot flips, or even a late shove, a lot of people see it as an ugly skateboarding trick. Part of it likely comes from people not being able to do them because, let's be honest, most late flips are pretty hard to do. Another reason why late flips are considered an ugly trick is because most of the time you don't actually catch it and you more so just land on the board. It's even worse when they bounce off the ground before you even land on it, which tends to be the case a lot of times, especially when someone is still learning them. Either way, a lot of people think any kind of late flip looks ugly regardless of how you catch it. The one exception to late flips seems to be with manuals, in which case people are much more accepting of them. Next on the list are pogos. Honestly, I'm not even going to explain this one. You should just already know why people don't like them. Board slides on ledges are largely considered one of the ugliest tricks in skateboarding. Other than people who haven't been skating very long, no one really board slides ledges. The exception for this is if the ledge is narrow enough to deck your board, in which case people are usually okay with them. This is kind of a weird one because depending on the ledge, a board slide can either be a pretty cool trick that most people like or an ugly beginner trick that no one likes. Basically, if the ledge is narrow enough for a board to lay flat, it's generally considered acceptable. On the other hand, if the ledge is too wide for the board to lock in, it's usually seen as an ugly trick. The reason why people don't like this trick is because you can't really lock into it unless the ledge is skinny, and it just generally looks weird to board side ledges where your board isn't locked in. This goes for both frontside board slides and backside board slides, but it doesn't really apply to lip slides. Most of the tricks on this list are pretty well known as the ugliest skate tricks, but it wasn't until I decided to make this video that I found out that a lot of people think double flips are ugly too. From what I could gather, there's two main reasons why a lot of skateboarders don't like double flips. The first reason is because, like some of the other tricks on this list, you don't always catch a double flip. Instead, you just land on top of the board. It is possible to actually catch a double flip, but it seems like most of the time people land on the board just before it hits the ground. The other reason why people don't like double flips is because they're essentially the same as a kickflip, but with another flip. This is kind of self-evident, but the reasoning behind it is that it's not that much more difficult and it's somewhat of a circus trick rather than an actual skateboarding trick. I've always thought that double flips look cool, especially when someone like Jimmy Carlin did them, but then again, it all comes down to opinion. Despite being one of the hardest skateboarding tricks there is, a lot of skateboarders think laser flips are ugly. This can be a surprise to some people because laser flips are largely considered one of the hardest flat ground tricks. With that in mind, it does kind of make sense why some people don't like them. The way the board flips for laser flips is a bit of a weird motion, and the way you have to move your legs to do one does look a little odd. Laser flips are also another one of those tricks that are often landed on rather than caught, but there are cases when someone who's good at laser flips can somewhat catch them, even if it's not super high like other tricks. Unlike a lot of the other skateboarding tricks that people consider ugly, generally speaking, most people at least respect laser flips. It seems like even if someone doesn't think a laser flip looks cool, they still respect it just because of how hard it is to do. I mean, seriously, how many people do you personally know who can laser flip? Another trick that's often considered ugly are pressure flips. Pressure flips can be any trick that's flipped solely with the popping foot, but the most common pressure flip is a pressure inward heel, so when someone says pressure flips, that's usually what they're referring to. If you don't think that people absolutely hate pressure flips, go ahead and do one in a game of skate and see what happens. Aside from being a guaranteed letter on most people, it's also guaranteed to be one of the most hated on tricks. Since pressure flips don't involve flicking, they're almost always super low to the ground, which makes them look pretty sloppy even when they're done right. Pressure heel flips are even worse, and a lot of times people either barely leave the ground or completely rocket flip. They're also pretty hard to do in the first place, which is naturally going to make a lot of skateboarders not like them. Varial kickflips just might be the most despised trick in all of skateboarding. If you ask a group of skaters what the worst skateboarding trick is, 9 times out of 10 they'll tell you varial flip, and the other time they're gonna tell you fakie varial. The reason why varial kickflips are hated so much isn't really clear either. It's almost like everyone just decided one day that it wasn't cool, and it's been that way ever since. This isn't to say that they're never done, and there hasn't been some clean varial flips over the years, but they're definitely few and far between. It seems like the main reason for not liking varial flips is because it's largely considered a beginner flip trick, and it's mostly seen as a stepping stone to 360 flips. The weird thing is, everyone loves 360 flips, which is just a varial flip with another shove, and backside flips are also seen as okay, which is really just a varial flip that you turn with. The thought process seems to be that if you're going to varial flip, you might as well tray flip, but other than that, there's no real reason why people hate them so much. It's safe to say that when it comes to ledges and rails, wheelie grinds are widely considered the ugliest skateboarding trick that there is. For those who don't know, a wheelie grind is when the front truck of the board is grinding with the back truck hanging below the ledge or rail. It's also nicknamed the nose smith, lazy grind, and scum grind, which right away should show you the sentiment that most skateboarders have towards it. Wheelie grinds are probably the least popular grind trick, and the majority of the time they're done, it's on accident. Sometimes if someone tries to do a 50-50 or nose grind, they'll accidentally do a wheelie, but it's very rare that someone does one intentionally. If you think about it, it kind of makes sense why people hate on this trick because everything about it is pretty weird. The board doesn't even level when you pop on. When it's locked in, the back of the board just hangs there, and even popping out looks awkward. They can be fun to do, and if you're good at nollie flips, then it's easy to flip out, but most skateboarders still see it as one of the ugliest skateboarding tricks.
Oh!
I'll take it.
Wheelie! Keep going.
Go.
Nollie!
How many?
Flip! Out!
Even though a body varial is a trick variation and not actually a trick, it's still one of the most hated maneuvers in skateboarding. Body varials were never a super popular trick variation, but it seems like they were at least tolerated for a while. They were almost always seen as a weird circus trick, and it stayed that way for a really long time. Then the whole trendy skateboarding era was born, and people took what was already a widely disliked trick and elevated it to a trick that a lot of skateboarders hated entirely. I mean, it's safe to say that people hate on body varials more than people hate on pineapple on pizza, and that's a bold statement to make. It's also scientifically proven that there's a direct correlation between a skateboarder's age and their hatred towards body varials. Maybe if people didn't constantly do them in baggy banana camo pants from the 90s, the growing resentment towards body varials wouldn't have happened, but at this point, we'll never know. The weird thing about people not liking body varials is a lot of times they do look pretty cool, but it still seems to be a pretty polarizing trick where people either love them or they hate them. Most skateboarders out there absolutely hate Benihanas, and I'm not talking about the restaurant. It's actually kind of hard to find a good reason for someone hating a Benihana other than just not liking the way it looks. Depending on who does them, it can look kind of weird because you're spreading your legs and squatting down midair, which is a bit of an awkward body movement to do. It's even worse if someone's unlucky enough to catch a backside view of it, especially after you've worked up a sweat. Another reason why people hate Benihanas is because it's usually a go-to flyout trick, and they're usually just done to catch other people's attention. It's a trick that's super easy to do, but always impresses people who don't actually skate. Even if it's done on street, people hate on street grabs too, so there's really no winning when it comes to this trick. A dolphin flip, also known as a forward flip, is pretty high up on most skaters' list of ugly skate tricks. Dolphin flips are essentially a varial kickflip that flips forward rather than sideways, you know, kind of like a dolphin. Now, people already hate varial kickflips, so to basically take the same trick and add a weird front flip motion to it doesn't really help the cause. If you add up the fact that dolphin flips look weird, you can't really catch them, they're pretty hard to do, and they have the same motion as a varial kickflip, you basically get the perfect trick for people to hate on. With that said, if you can manage to do one in a game of skate, there's almost a 100% chance everyone's getting a letter. When it comes to deciding which skateboarding tricks are good and which ones are bad, it's really all subjective and it just comes down to opinion. There's always going to be tricks that some people think look ugly and other people think look clean, and honestly, a lot of tricks just naturally go in and out of style. At the end of the day, you should do whatever tricks you want because that's what skateboarding is really all about. If you think that there were some tricks that should or shouldn't have been on the list, go ahead and leave a comment. Be sure to drop a like on the video, and with that said, thanks for watching.